I never imagined that one careless sentence about my work would push me to make a decision that changed a powerful man's future and finally saved my own dignity. Welcome to Trust and Treason Files, where we expose the raw truth behind the masks people wear. My name is Daniel Harper. I am 44 years old, and for most of my life, I believed respect was something you earned by staying quiet, working hard, and never making anyone uncomfortable, especially family. I grew up in a house where loud voices won and soft voices learned to survive. My older brother Mark was the golden child, the one everyone praised, the one who could do no wrong, while I was the dependable one, the helper, the one who cleaned up after everyone else's mistakes and never asked for credit. Mark became a hospital executive, a man who loved titles and attention, while I became a nurse, a job I chose because I cared about people, because I believed helping someone breathe easier, hurt less, or feel less alone mattered more than applause. For years I worked long shifts, missed holidays, and came home exhausted but proud, and even when family dinners turned into stages for Mark stories about deals, donors, and big numbers, I stayed quiet, smiling politely, telling myself that respect did not need noise. The first time he called my job scrub work, he laughed as if it was a joke, and everyone else laughed too, and I remember feeling my face grow warm while I stared at my plate, telling myself it was not worth the scene, not worth being the difficult one. After that, it did not stop. Every gathering came with small comments, how I just followed orders, how I washed up after real doctors, how I would never understand real pressure. And every time I swallowed it, because I thought silence was strength. My wife noticed before I did how those words were changing me, how I spoke less, smiled less, and came home heavier than my tired body could explain, but I told her it was nothing, just family being. Family, because admitting it hurt felt like losing. The real warning came when Mark started asking me questions that felt wrong, not about my life, but about my hospital, about internal systems, about donation reviews, about how decisions moved quietly before they became public. At first, I answered harmless things, general things, because I trusted him, because he was my brother, because I believed family did not use each other like tools. Then one night, after a long shift, he called me drunk, laughing loudly, and said something that froze me. He said, "You know, even scrub work can be useful when you know where to look." I laughed weakly, but inside something cracked because for the first time I realized he did not see me as a person. He saw me as a door. I began paying attention after that, noticing how he remembered small details I mentioned, how he asked questions that matched problems in his hospital, how he suddenly knew things he should not have known yet. Still, I stayed quiet, because fear does not always look like shaking. Sometimes it looks like smiling and hoping things will fix themselves. The betrayal became real at a family gathering when Mark, surrounded by relatives, pointed at me and said, "You know what, without people like him doing scrub work, real professionals like me could never shine." And everyone laughed again, louder this time, while I felt something inside me finally stand up. I told him calmly that my job mattered, that every patient I touched trusted me with their life, and that respect should not depend on titles. And for a second the room went quiet, but then he smiled, the kind of smile that does not reach the eyes, and said, "Relax, little brother, do not get emotional." That night, I did not sleep, not because of anger, but because clarity had arrived, slow and heavy, telling me that staying silent was not peace, it was permission. A week later, I discovered something by accident, a document left open on a shared system, showing that confidential information from my hospital had reached Mark's hospital before it should have, affecting a major funding decision that involved millions of dollars. I did not panic, I did not rush, but I started watching, comparing dates, files, access logs, and slowly the truth formed like a shadow growing solid. Someone had been using information that passed near me, and I was the easiest bridge. I realized then that the jokes were not just cruel. They were reminders of where he thought I belonged, beneath him, useful but invisible, easy to use and easy to blame. I stood in my kitchen that night, holding my phone, thinking about every time I stayed quiet, every time I chose peace over respect, and I understood something painful. Silence had protected him, not me. I knew that whatever I did next would change my life, my family, and the way I was seen forever, But I also knew that if I stayed quiet one more time, I would never respect myself again. And that was the moment I stopped being just his younger brother and started becoming my own witness. After that night in my kitchen, nothing around me looked the same. Not my home, not my job, not even my own reflection, because once you see how someone has been using you, you start questioning every memory that felt normal before. I did not confront Mark. I did not tell my wife yet. And I did not report anything because fear does not scream. It whispers, telling you to wait, to be careful, to not destroy your own life while trying to fix someone else's wrong. At work, I became quieter, not because I had nothing to say, but because every word felt dangerous. Every screen felt like a witness, and every login felt like a shadow watching me breathe. I started double-checking everything I touched, every file I opened, every system I logged into, because I knew that if something went wrong, the easiest story would be that the scrub worker made a mistake. The hardest part was pretending everything was fine, go to family dinners, hearing Mark talk proudly about deals and donors, watching people admire him, while I sat there knowing that some of his success was built on doors that opened because of me. Sometimes he would smile at me across the table, a slow, knowing smile, and ask, "Busy at work?" And the way he said it felt like a test, like he wanted to see fear in my eyes. I learned to control my face, to answer lightly, to become a quiet actor in my own life, because survival sometimes means becoming invisible. At night, the questions did not let me sleep. What if I was already blamed for something? What if logs were changed? What if one day someone knocked on my door and told me my life was over because I trusted the wrong person? I began saving small things, harmless-looking screenshots, timestamps, notes of conversations, not because I planned revenge, but because I needed to know the truth before anyone else decided it for me. The pressure made me smaller in ways no one could see, my shoulders always tense, my voice softer, my laughter forced, and even my patients noticed, asking if I was tired, and I would smile and say yes, because explaining fear is harder than hiding it. Mark kept calling, not often, just enough, asking casual questions, slipping in comments about things he should not yet know, and every time he did, a piece of me felt colder. Once he joked, you and I make a good team, even if you do not know it, and he laughed, but my hands shook after the call ended. I wanted to tell my wife everything, but part of me was ashamed that I let someone use me, ashamed that I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. And shame is heavy, it sits on your chest and tells you that you deserve the weight. The isolation became real when I stopped sharing my thoughts, stopped trusting my own voice, and started living like a man waiting for a storm he could already smell in the air. One evening, after another long shift, I sat alone in my car and realized something painful. Mark was not just using me, he was teaching me to disappear, and every day I stayed silent. I became more invisible to myself. I started writing at night, not plans, not revenge, just truth, what happened, what I felt, what I saw, because I was afraid that one day even my memory would try to protect him. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. This was not just about money or power. This was about control, about making sure I stayed small so he could stay tall. The grind was not loud. It was quiet, slow, and heavy, like water wearing down stone, and I could feel myself changing, becoming someone who watched life instead of living it. But deep inside that silence, something else was growing too. Not anger, not revenge, but a steady voice asking one question every night. How long will you let this continue before you choose yourself? And every night, that voice grew louder, even when everything else in me stayed silent. The night everything finally came into focus did not feel dramatic at first. It felt quiet and ordinary, which somehow made it more terrifying, because real truth rarely arrives with noise. It arrives while you're doing something small like washing dishes or scrolling through a screen, and suddenly your life looks different. I was on my work computer finishing reports when a system alert popped up, not loud, not urgent, just a soft notification that usually meant nothing, but this time it listed access under my name at a time I was not even in the building. At first, I told myself it was a glitch, because your mind always tries to protect the people you once trusted, but when I checked again, and then checked again, the same pattern appeared, logins that matched my account, but not my hours and actions I never took. My hands felt heavy as I pulled up older records, moving slowly, afraid of what I might see. And the deeper I looked, the clearer it became. Someone had been using my credentials for months, quietly, carefully, like a shadow wearing my face. I did not jump to Mark's name, not yet, but every clue walked in his direction because he was the only one who ever asked about my systems, my schedules, my access, always in that joking tone that made questions sound harmless. I saved everything, dates, screenshots, access trails, and I stored them where only I could reach them, because truth needs a safe place before it can speak. Then came the moment that ended all doubt. Mark called me while I was still at work, and before I could say much, he mentioned a donor file that had not even been finalized yet. And when I asked how he knew, there was a pause just long enough to feel wrong. He laughed it off, said someone must have told him, but I knew then that my silence had been permission, and my trust had been the door. I did not shout, I did not accuse, because confrontation without proof is just noise, so I waited, watched, and collected more, letting him think he was safe. The turning point came when I cross-checked one file that had been changed under my name, and the change directly benefited a company connected to Mark's circle, and that was when the story stopped being confusing and started being clear. I went home that night and finally told my wife everything, not as a dramatic speech, but as a tired man admitting he had been afraid, and she did not blame me. She listened, and that gave me more strength than any plan ever could. Together, we decided I would speak, not to Mark, but to the system itself, because power is safer when it goes through rules, not emotions. I prepared a full report, not emotional, not angry, just facts, timelines, access logs, and patterns. And when I handed it in, my hands were calm, because truth feels lighter than fear. The investigation started quietly, like my suffering had, and for a while nothing seemed to change, but I knew something was moving under the surface. Then Mark stopped calling. Then his name stopped coming up in family conversations. Then one day, my supervisor asked me to step into a private office, not with suspicion, but with seriousness, and told me that the access misuse was confirmed and that my name had been cleared. I did not feel happy. I felt empty, because when betrayal ends, it does not leave relief first. It leaves silence, the kind where you realize how long you've been holding your breath. Later that week, Mark finally called, not confident, not joking, just quiet, and he said, "You did not have to do this." I told him softly, "I did not do anything to you. I just stopped protecting you." He hung up without another word. That was the moment I knew the truth had finished speaking, and now consequences were learning how to talk. By the time everything reached its end, it did not look like revenge. It looked like paperwork, meetings, and quiet decisions made behind closed doors, and that somehow felt more powerful than any dramatic ending. Mark was removed from every project tied to funding, and later from the organization itself. Not with shouting, not with public shame, but with a letter and a meeting that lasted less than an hour, because when trust breaks at that level, there's nothing left to argue. Some family members try to stay neutral. Others slowly stop calling me, and I learned that loyalty often chooses comfort over truth, but I also learned that peace comes when you stop chasing people who already chose a side. The hospital grant was frozen, reviewed, and finally reassigned, not because of anger, but because rules exist to protect what matters. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like those rules were standing with me. My name, once whispered with doubt, was spoken clearly again, and that meant more than any apology, because reputation is built slowly but broken fast, and getting it back felt like learning how to breathe again. Mark never apologized, not in words that mattered, but silence can be an answer too, and sometimes it is the only one you will ever get. What changed most was not my job or my family. It was me, because I stopped trying to be understood by people who benefited from misunderstanding me. I learned that endurance is not weakness, but silence without boundaries is, and I promised myself that I would never again protect someone who was harming me, just to keep things calm. Now, when I think about that moment when he called my work scrub work, I do not feel small anymore. I feel clear, because dignity does not need approval, it only needs truth. My life is quieter now, but it is honest, and that is a kind of peace I never had before. If you're listening to this and you are carrying someone else's lies on your back, remember this: protecting the truth is not betrayal, even when it costs you people you once loved. If you believe in justice, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. New files open daily.